Hey, what's up everybody? TooTallToby here, and in today's Onshape step-by-step tutorial for beginners, we're going to go through and create all the features for this pump pulley. This is a component that you will commonly see in the world of mechanical engineering, and hopefully after today's video, you will be able to construct this model in Onshape. So let's get started here by going to our Onshape document manager and choosing to create a new document. So create document, and we're going to call this Pump Pulley. Now, before we get started constructing our sketches, let's go into this hamburger menu up here and make sure that we're working in the correct units. So we click this hamburger menu, we choose workspace units, and we're going to make sure that our length unit is set to millimeters. We're going to be using millimeters for this tutorial. So set this to millimeters, hit the green check mark, and now we're ready to construct our first sketch. Now, as far as shortcut keys go, let me bring up my keyboard cam here, and I'm going to press the letter S on my keyboard, and the S key on your keyboard brings up this shortcut menu, and I use this shortcut menu all the time. I'm going to use it all throughout today's tutorial, and I've made a video about how you can customize this menu, how you can add and remove icons to establish the most efficient workflows in Onshape. But for today, I'm basically going to be sticking with the default icons that are on the S key menus. So my workflow for beginning a new sketch is I choose the front plane, I press the letter S, and then I choose the sketch command to begin a new sketch. Then I press the letter N on my keyboard, which orients the view normal to. Now, for the geometry of this pulley, we're going to perform what's called a revolve. And usually when you perform a revolve, you create a construction line as a center line. So I'm going to press the S key, begin the line command, single click the origin, and then as I move my mouse over here, so I just clicked one time, you see I'm not touching my mouse, moving my mouse around, I can press the letter Q on my keyboard, and Q switches from solid geometry to construction geometry. So I'm going to turn this into a construction line, like so, and then I'm going to hit escape, and then I'm going to press the letter S, and I'm going to jump into the rectangle command. So I use the S key a lot, line, rectangle, circle, use the S key a lot here in sketch mode. And I'm going to create a rectangle here that starts at the origin and comes up like so. That's going to be our hub. And I'm going to create a rectangle over here towards the right, directly above that right point, directly above the origin. Single click, move my mouse down like so. And that is going to be our rim. So I'm going to hit escape. And now I want to create a dimension for the overall diameter, the outer diameter, or the OD of this pulley. So I press the letter S and jump into the dimension command. Click this line, and then click this line down here. And now this is really cool. Before I click again, if I move my mouse down below that center line, it gives me a doubled dimension or a diameter dimension for the outer diameter of this pulley. So I can single left click, let go of my mouse, and then type in 150. Doubled dimensions are very useful when you're performing revolves in Onshape. So I'm going to do another double dimension here, this line to the construction line, move down below here, and that diameter for the hub is going to be 28 millimeters. And then I can just click on this line here, the lower line of the rectangle, and that lets me define the depth of that hub. So I'll make that 24 millimeters. And I can click on this very upper line here and define the depth of the rim. We'll make that 36 millimeters. Now, I'm going to create one more line up here in this rectangle, so S key line, and this line is going to represent the diameter where the belt is sitting on the pulley. Just be careful when you go to sketch this line. You want to sketch it along this left side edge, but don't pick the midpoint. So somewhere along this left side edge of this rectangle, all the way across to this right side edge, and then we can hit escape, and we can define the diameter where the belt is going to be sitting by adding a dimension from this line to the construction line, and then we go down below here, and we'll make that diameter 138. That's where the belt is going to be sitting on the pulley. And then we can add a dimension here from this line to this line and say there's going to be 10 millimeters worth of material between the bottom of the belt and the bottom of the rim. So now let's create the webbing here for our spokes. We're going to do this with two lines. So S key line, you can single click here, move your mouse up, single click. You can just hit escape and then S key line again. And for the second line, we're going to single click here, move our mouse. We're going to put our mouse over the first line. See, right now, if I move this mouse around, it's just kind of out in space. But if we put our mouse over that first line and then move out in this direction again, you'll see that you can pick up on a relationship of parallel. So this is really nice. You kind of wake up that line by putting your mouse over it, and then you move over here, and now you see that line is orange, and we're getting that parallel relationship. And we want this to come all the way up to this other line, not at the end point, but just along this other line. So you single click, and there we go. We've created a nice parallel line there. You'll see if you move one of these, they both move together. They are parallel to one another. So now we'll add a dimension for the width of that webbing. So S key dimension, add a dimension here for the width of that webbing, and we'll make that width 10 millimeters. And now we can see here that the sketch still has blue lines. I'm going to press escape. The sketch still has blue lines, and we also have this minus sign over here in the tree. So what that means is the sketch is currently under-defined or under-constrained, and that's not what we want. Generally speaking, we want all of our sketches to be fully defined or fully constrained. So let's add one final dimension here. You'll see this can still move left and right. So let's add one final dimension here. So S key dimension from this point to the webbing, and we'll make that offset 2 millimeters. And oh yeah, that looks good. The whole sketch is black, and we no longer have the minus sign over here in the tree. So that's what we want our first sketch to look like, and hopefully you were able to get to this point. If not, just pause the video and get caught up to this point. And if so, be sure to hit the like button on this video, and be sure to let me know down in the comments if you learned any cool shortcuts during that section. But now we're ready to take this sketch and turn it into a revolve. So here's the revolve command in Onshape. We're going to click on the revolve command, and then we're going to come down here to where it says revolve axis, and we're going to click in that box. And then we're going to click here on the center line that we sketched for our revolve. And we see that Onshape takes that entire sketch and revolves it about that center line, and this thing is looking good. So we hit the green check mark, and now we've got our first revolved feature here in this model. Now, let's create the area where the belt is going to sit. So the grooves here for the belt and the little pocket here that it's going to sit in. So we go to the front plane, S key, begin a sketch, N key, and now we're going to show the original sketch. So we're going to show this sketch 1. So you come over here to the tree and you click on the eyeball to show the sketch 1. And the reason we're doing this is because we want to reference this line here, because that is where our belt is going to be resting. So let's start out here up top by centering the geometry. So S key line, we're going to single click here on this corner, move our mouse over, single click again. Then we're going to let go of our mouse and we're going to type in a dimension. This is called auto dimensioning, very useful in Onshape. So we're going to type in a dimension here, 2, enter. We're going to move our mouse over in this direction, single click, let go of our mouse. We're going to type in a dimension 30, enter, and then we're going to move our mouse over here in this direction to create a final line. And you'll see here that the preview dimension shows 4. So one dimension is 2, one dimension is 4. That's not good because we want that 30 to be centered. So we're just going to left click here. We're not going to type a dimension, so you can just press escape, escape, escape. So what we can do is we can take these two short lines and we can make them equal. We can make an equal sketch relationship. So let's click on this 2 dimension here and press delete. Click on the 2, press delete on your keyboard, gets rid of that 2 dimension. So now we see that these lines are not equal. They're able to kind of shimmy all around here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to click on this line. Now to click on this line here, sometimes it's helpful to move your mouse around a little bit until it highlights in orange. So we're going to click on this little short line here, move our mouse over, move it around a little bit, click on this other short line. You'll notice the mouse tells you how many things you've clicked on. You don't have to hold control or anything, but it's telling you that there are 2 items that are currently selected. So we're going to go up here to our sketching relationships, and we're going to choose equal. Now you'll notice that equal has a hotkey E. And we use equal quite often in Onshape sketching. So it's worth it to memorize or to write down what some of these most common sketch relationships are. Coincident is I, concentric is Shift O, parallel is B. It's worth it to kind of take a moment and start to memorize some of these most common ones, because that way you can just hit the keyboard shortcut. But we're going to choose equal here, and now those 2 lines are equal, and that means this 30 dimension is centered, and that is what we want for this groove. So now we're going to begin the line command. So S key line, And we're going to create a line that comes from this point down to this line that we created in sketch 1, down at an angle, and then back up at an angle. And we can hit escape. And then we can pick this line, and we can press the letter E. That will make those two lines equal. We just learned about that a moment ago. And then we can press the S key, and we can add a dimension here, a dimension from this point to this point. The width of that groove will make that 5 millimeters. And a dimension from this line down to this point, the depth of that groove will make that 4 millimeters. So 5 millimeters, 4 millimeters. And now let's jump into this command here, linear pattern. So the linear sketch pattern command lets us pick these 1, 2 entities. Then we can double click here on this 25. That's the spacing of the pattern. That's going to change to 5. And then we can double click here on this 3x. That's the number of instances. And we're going to change that to 6. Enter. And then if you move your mouse, you'll see you can left click to green check mark, and that finishes that pattern. So now all we need to do is S key line, create a line that goes from this point up to this point, and that is a beautiful sketch for our groove. We could zoom out a little bit here. We could rotate the view a little bit. Let's jump into the revolve command again. We're going to use revolve once again here. Revolve. And for our revolve axis, so we click in this box, revolve axis, we're going to click on this line, the same line from sketch 1. You can use that same line again. It's no problem. But the feature's showing up in red, and that's always bad in Onshape when we see that feature showing in red. But that's because we're trying to add geometry, and instead we should be removing geometry. So we take our mouse here to remove that geometry, and oh yeah, that is what we want from that cut revolve. We want to remove that geometry. We hit the green check mark, and wow, this thing is really coming together. That looks great. That's going to give our belt some really nice grip as it's running through this pulley. So now let's create the geometry for our spoke. We're going to create a little triangle shape here, and then we'll create a pattern of that triangle shape. So let's go to this surface here, and then we can press the letter S, begin a sketch, and then we can press the letter N. N is going to let us orient that view. And now we're going to create the geometry for that spoke. Now, we need that geometry to be oriented in a way that we can pattern it 6 times. So let's create 2 lines. And so we did this a little bit earlier. We made 2 lines by creating the first line. So single click, move your mouse, single click again, then press escape, and then create another line. But this time, we're going to show you a top secret pro move. And that is, I'm going to click on this line and I'm going to delete it. So click on the line, press delete. And that is when you know you're sketching 2 lines and you know they're not going to be connected, you can click and drag. You can click the left mouse button and drag, and that'll make 1 line, but it'll leave you in the line command. So what I mean is normally what you do is you go click, move your mouse, click, move your mouse, click, move your mouse, click, move your mouse. So you get a bunch of lines or a chain of lines. Well, instead what we can do is we can click and hold the button down, click and drag, and that just makes 1 line. And then we can do the same thing here, click and drag, and that just makes 1 line. And I know it's a little thing. It's not like we're saving minutes and minutes and minutes every time we do it, but even just a few clicks, if you can save a few clicks over and over and over again, it really does add up. So we're going to hit escape here, and now we're going to add a dimension, so S key dimension, so that we can have 6 instances of this spoke. So we'll make a dimension here from this line to this line, and we'll make that dimension 360 over 6. So you can do some basic arithmetic here as you're creating dimensions in Onshape. 360 over 6 and enter, and there we go. I know we probably could have figured that out in our head, but it's good to know in case there's 7 instances or 11 instances. You can just kind of type in 360 over whatever the number of instances of the circular pattern is. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create the geometry for our spoke inside of this geometry, and then we're going to perform a pattern of that cut, and that'll give us that spoke shape. So let's take these lines and perform what's called a sketch offset. Up here on your sketching toolbar, you can see we've got this option for offset. So we're going to say offset, and then we can take this line and this line, And we can choose to offset those lines. We can offset them to the inside or to the outside. And we can also double click on this dimension here to control what the distance of the offset is. Now, normally what you do is you control it to the inside or the outside, and then you left click in the background, and then you type in the distance of the offset. We want our spoke to be 10 millimeters. So offsetting this by 5 millimeters is actually perfect. 5, enter, and we are done with that offset. So we can do the same thing here with this arc that's running around the rim. So you can click on this arc here that's running around the rim, and you can choose offset. And now we're going to reverse the direction of that offset, so it's going to the inside. We're going to left click, and now instead of typing 5, we're going to type 1, enter. So we're able to offset that to the inside, and that gives us this nice triangular region here that we are going to use for our cut to cut away the material from the wheel. So let's trim away that geometry for that wedge so that we can add fillets in the corner. And the trim command in Onshape is found here. When you're in sketch mode, you can click on these scissors here, and then you can left click and drag, and that lets you trim. And the way the trim command works is when you left click and drag, you make this little squiggly. Well, what you do is you left click and drag through some other sketch geometry. So I can left click and drag through that offset arc, and I can left click and drag through that offset line, and I can left click and drag through that offset arc. And that leaves me with this nice triangular wedge here in the middle. So the trim command, you left click and drag, it makes this little squiggly line here, and you just drag right through the sketch geometry that you're trying to trim. Pretty cool stuff, right? Have you ever used trim before? If not, let us know down in the comments. So now let's add a sketch fillet command. So we go here to the sketch fillet command, and we're going to click on this point, and this point. And then we can double click on the dimension for the fillet. So again, you'll notice your mouse is saying if you left click, that's a green check mark. So we left click, and then that automatically takes us into the value of the fillets. We can make it like 4 millimeters, or we can double click there on that dimension and make it 10 millimeters. I think 8 millimeters actually looks pretty good. So double click there, we'll make that 8 millimeters for that fillet. And this is looking awesome. So let's now take this and turn it into an extrude, and we're going to use that extrude to remove some material. Now you'll notice here that we now have 2 closed regions. We have this kind of Pac-Man looking shape here, so that's one closed region, and then we have the triangle, and that's another closed region. So when we go to turn this into an extrude, when we click extrude here, what ends up happening is both of those regions get extruded, and that's not really what we want. So we could click this little X here to clear the selections, but in Onshape, the spacebar on your keyboard also clears your selections. So as soon as I jump into that extrude command, if I realize that's not really what I want, I can just press the spacebar and then immediately move my mouse down here and click inside of this region. Move my mouse down here inside the triangle and left click. Look at that, that's the region that I want. So using the spacebar to clear selections is a huge time saver in Onshape. So now let's take that triangle shape, and let's say we want to remove material, and you'll notice here it's set to blind and 25 millimeters. Now that works, and it does cut through that face of the pulley, but I think I want that to be through all instead. So for the end type here, let's change that to through all, and yes, this looks good. And so we hit the green check mark, and there is that triangular cut. Now, this is going to become a spoke here, and maybe just to make sure that nobody gets hurt if they're working with this pulley, let's add a small fillet here on this edge and on this edge. So we'll go to the fillet command, and we can just make this like a 2 millimeter or 1 millimeter. I like that 1 millimeter. And you just pick this edge here in the back and this edge here in the front. And Onshape utilizes what's called tangent propagation when you're creating a fillet. And what tangent propagation means is we picked this edge here, and this edge here is tangent to this edge. So because these are tangent to each other, continue the fillet around that edge, and continue the fillet around this edge because they're tangent, and this edge all the way around. So we only have to pick that one edge, and it fillets all the way around. So now that we've got that fillet created, we can hit the green check mark, and yeah, I think we're about ready to pattern this. The thing about 3D CAD and the thing about Onshape that you want to get used to is if you rename your features, it makes it much easier to tell what you're working on later on in the model, and especially later on in your career when you reopen this document. So over here in the tree, I'm going to go to that extrude that we made, and I'm going to press Shift N. That's the shortcut key for rename. And then I'm going to choose to rename this to Triangle Cut, Enter. And then I'm going to pick this fillet here. So I'm going to click in the background so nothing is selected. Click this fillet, Shift N, and I'm going to call that fillet dash triangle cut. And that way, if I use those features in a pattern, or if I use those features as part of a mirror, or anytime I need to reference those features, it's going to be very obvious what those features are. As opposed to the generic extrude 1 and fillet 1, it's kind of hard to tell what those features are used for, but when you rename them, it's much easier to tell. So now let's expand the linear pattern command here, and let's choose circular pattern. And anytime you create a pattern in Onshape, you have to declare what type of pattern you're creating, a part pattern, a feature pattern, or a face pattern. The default is part pattern, so you have to take a moment here and just fly out this menu and change it to feature pattern. And now the features to pattern are going to be very easy for me to select. I can just come over here to the tree and choose triangle cut and fillet triangle cut. And right away I can see here the features to pattern. Yes, that's what I want, triangle cut and fillet triangle cut. Now for the axis of pattern, I'm going to just choose any circular edge here that's in the middle of the part. So I'll choose this edge here that's highlighted in orange. And then for the number of instances, we're going to set that to 6. You can press enter and that updates the preview, and you can press enter again and that finishes the command. And we are now on the home stretch here, just one more feature, and then we are done with this tutorial. So for our final feature, we're going to create the bore and the keyway that are running through the center of this pulley. So we'll pick this face here, S key, begin a sketch, N key to get normal to, S key to jump into the circle command, and then we're going to single click here on the origin, move our mouse, single click again, and then let go of our mouse and type 16. And that is the diameter for that bore. So auto dimensioning, hugely helpful in Onshape. We're also going to create a rectangle here. So you can press the S key and jump into the rectangle command. And we're going to create a rectangle here like so. And we're going to say that that rectangle is going to, let's just hit escape. We can just add these dimensions ourselves in just a moment. But before we add the dimensions, let's center this rectangle on the origin. So you click this line of the rectangle, you click here on the origin, and you add a midpoint relationship. And what we remember from earlier is the shortcut for midpoint is Shift M. Hold Shift key, press M, and boom, you added a midpoint relationship here. So now that rectangle is centered on the origin. So now all we need to do is S key, dimension. The width of the keyway here is going to be 6 millimeters. And the distance from the top of the keyway all the way down to the bottom of this arc here is going to be 18 millimeters. 18. And that is your final sketch for this exercise. And so with that sketch in place, we are going to jump into the extrude command. From the extrude command here, what we're going to do is we're going to say remove. We're going to say we want that depth to be through all, and we're going to hit the green check mark. And there we go. We've added that bore with the keyway running through that pulley. Now for some final cleanup here, we can press the letter P on our keyboard. The letter P on our keyboard is going to hide all of our planes. If we press the letter P again, it'll show the planes. You can also hold Shift and press the letter P, and that'll hide the planes and any sketches and the origin, so all the reference geometry. So Shift P. And then maybe we want to change the color of this part. A lot of times your customers are going to want the parts to show as the same color as their parts. So what you can do to make your customers happy is you can right mouse button here on the name of the part down in the parts list. You can choose Edit Appearance, and then you can choose to make this an orange color. I'm picking this color here from this column. It's kind of the second column here in the group of different colors. So there we go. That looks pretty good. We hit the green check mark, and there is your pump pulley. Congratulations, you were able to make it through this step-by-step tutorial, and I hope that you enjoyed learning all the fun tips and tricks along the way. If you did, let us know down below in the comments. Let us know what your favorite tip or trick or shortcut was that you learned from this video. If you got stuck along the way, let us know that as well. We'll be sure to monitor the comments and answer any questions that you have. Be sure to like this video, be sure to subscribe, and be sure to come back for the next Onshape tutorial.